Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into today's episode of the Money Insights Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Allen. With me, as always, Rod the Pod Zabriskie. Rod, what's up, man?
Hey, I am doing great. How are you?
I can't complain. We're here. We're ready to rock and roll. We're going to talk we're going to blast traditional financial advisors. What's more fun than that?
I can't think of anything.
I can't think of anything either. Before we do, any important events that we need to know about in the life of the Zabriskie family?
No, man, nothing new. Just
right.
Just plugging along, making
one of those rare weeks.
Summer.
One of those rare weeks where we don't have a Zabriskie update. So we'll hang tight. We'll
relish them when you get them.
Yes, that's what we'll do. Okay, Rod. So today's episode is titled "Want to Build Real Wealth? Stop Thinking Like a Financial Advisor." And you could probably add traditional financial advisor into that, but the reality is that when you say financial advisors, like they're all pretty much traditional financial advisors, right?
Right.
So we're just gonna lay it out there, and there's a reason why we're talking about this, and we're gonna jump into a lot of the details as to why. But can I just say this? I have been on both sides of this fence. I've been firmly on the side of the traditional financial advisors. I came into the business with every intention of helping people manage their stocks, bonds, and mutual funds long-term, building a massive asset base of market money that I was managing for people. That was 100% my intention coming into the business. And I've told people this lots of times, but I kind of had a rude awakening, right? The rude awakening was like the realization that what I was doing wasn't helping people in the way that I thought it was. Okay, so quick story, Rod, and then we'll jump into what we're going to be talking about today. So we have a mutual friend, and you'll probably recognize this story as I get further into it. But we have a mutual friend, Rod. He's very much a traditional advisor, and he's been doing it for a long time. I would say he's probably 30 years now, maybe even a little bit longer than that. Built a really good, solid business, has a strong foundation of assets under management. And I was probably like five or 6 years ago that we were talking. And one of the things I like about this particular person is that they're just super open, they're not one of those people that's trying to suggest things are things that they aren't, right? He doesn't sugarcoat things. He doesn't overdo it. Okay. So what's my point? We're talking and he's like, and were you there, Rod? Is this ringing a bell?
I was not there, but I remember you telling me about it.
Okay.
So I'm tracking with you.
So I'm in the parking lot with him after we were hanging out for lunch, and he says, Christian, I've been managing, and he was talking about his best client. I've been managing their portfolio for 12, 13 years. And he's like, and I did an assessment over the time frame that we've had them, and they've wanted to make sure that it's always been in the market. They're not super aggressive, but certainly not conservative either. And he's like, I did this assessment and I found that the returns that they had gotten over the time with me was 2.5%. He's like, I could have just put them into an annuity and they would have gotten more than that over that time frame. And I remember that stuck out to me because by then I had already moved away from the traditional financial world. I had already gotten to this place where I didn't believe that I could have the same impact, the impact that I wanted to have for people by just, teaching them how to use correct asset allocation principles. It just wasn't getting people there. Okay. So what's my point? My point is that most financial advisors are trained to help people with the very basics. They're trained to make sure that your money doesn't run out in retirement. That's what you get when the moment you get into the business, they're constantly talking about, okay, how do we prepare for this risk, this situation, which by the way, all very important, right? We're not suggesting you don't want to prepare for death, disability, retirement, all those things, but it's more a matter of survival than it is thriving. And so my
Yeah.
belief is that traditional advisors work on this methodology typically of just saying, what is the need? Well, we know that they typically work off of a needs analysis system where it's saying, okay, I'm going to plan based on what you tell me you need. Okay, Rod, I got another story. I know I'm on one.
Oh boy.
So I've talked about my mom and her kind of catastrophic financial experience after my dad died.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of it, I haven't talked about this as much. A lot of it stemmed from the initial planning. Well, my mom, again, this is, 6 months after my dad's passed, and they're having the conversation with the advisors and they're asking her questions like, how much do you absolutely need to make sure that you're okay? Right. And, she's got her social security and a little bit of others, and so she's like, I think I could probably get to do with like, $1,500 in addition to my social security. And so what do? They basically created a plan that gave her basically what she absolutely needed and nothing more. Yep. The minimum that was needed. And then the rest that was there was like, well, honestly, they put it into a life insurance contract that was not appropriate for my mom. So overall bad situation. But my point is just to say advisors are trained to help people survive. At least that's been my experience. Now, I think when you at certain levels, like when you get into family office advisors and things like that, who are typically building network or working with high net worth people, they might be a little bit better. But even those people, in my experience, are typically trained to help people not lose the money that they've already gotten. They're not, the family office advisors are not the one that's helping people actually build wealth. And that's kind of been the epiphany in my world, Rod, is just that financial advisors don't help people build wealth. They usually take people that have built wealth in, the types of things that we talk about by being entrepreneurs, business owners, high income earners. Like they take those things that are already being built and then they try to make sure that you don't, squash it. But it's typically not built to try to build on top of it, to try to kind of take you to the next level. So anyway, that's kind of what we're going to talk about today, is some of the big differences between our core philosophies and what traditional advisors are teaching. And of course, our core message is that if you want to build wealth, like if you want to build real lasting multi-generational wealth, well, you've got to change your mindset entirely. And you cannot take on that mindset that is so prominent out there in the world. And it's the mindset that I just need to do enough to make sure that I can retire and at least be comfortable and those types of things. Well, the good news is, Rod, our audience typically doesn't like that anyway. So
yeah, it's true.
Okay.
And
so
then that's why they find us, right? They're thinking, I'm not liking this traditional path, what I'm on. I got to find something different. Well, maybe I'll say it this way. Most of them don't even know there's anything different or to think, understanding that there could be something different. Usually what happens is they bump into a friend or family member or somebody who lives on that kind of the alternative side. They start asking them questions and realize, oh, there's something different. Like I don't have to just do the 401k and the traditional, stocks, bonds, mutual fund, brokerage account. And then
crazy,
they start
right?
seeing stuff like what we do and different trajectory from there.
Yeah, a massively different trajectory. My own life is very much in line with that same trajectory, right? Like, and again, it's almost one of those things where you have to be there in order to understand it. So you have to be one of those people who starts to create real value and usually create a lot of income, a lot of money.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it starts to become a little bit more clear how I don't know the right word, uncooperative, we'll call it uncooperative, the traditional planning world is for high income earners trying to build real lasting wealth. Okay. So here's our core talking points for today, right? We're going to talk about why most advisors are trained in managing risk, not building wealth. We're going to talk about why traditional planning is very much built for the W-2 employee, not for entrepreneurs, investors, people who are really working to build multi-generational wealth. This is one we talk about all the time, Rod, and we'll hit on it briefly at least. The model that's typically out there prioritizes what? Accumulation, not Rod's favorite, cash flow.
Not cash flow. Yep.
Rod sees that and he just cringes. He's like, we've got to have more cash flow.
That's
right. I was thinking about this, Rod. You're the cash flow guy and I'm like the leverage guy. So like, you're like the safe, like I want to build this like safe, consistent income. And I'm like the let's go big or go home guy. And so we bring those things together and we've got cash flow. Anyway, my another rant. Okay. And then finally, we're going to talk about why wealthy people focus on cash flow and leverage and opportunity, not just on survival, right? Because there is a big difference. And I think at the core, it actually comes down to the way that we think about money more than anything else. Like that's the big difference. And really the way we think about life, it's probably not just money, it's money and life in general, right? And what we want.
Yep, exactly.
Now, I should say this isn't to suggest that there's a right or a wrong in terms of what people want. I am certainly not here to suggest that the minimalist that's living a happy life shouldn't be doing exactly what they're doing and enjoying their world. That's amazing for those people. I think everybody has to do it like what feels right for them. But there are some principles, and especially financial principles, that regardless of which style we're living in, we can make a lot more efficient, again, either way. So it's just that mind shift of how do I go from doing these traditional principles that we've just been seeing and are easy to grab hold of because they're in front of us constantly, and how do we shift over to those things that maybe are less comfortable and less familiar, but have a lot more upside. Okay. So Rod, here's my question for you. How do wealthy people think differently about money? Or that's probably the right way to say it.
Yeah. Well, the first thing that comes to mind is we often talk about the difference between an abundance mentality versus a scarcity mentality.
And that's really the core of what I'm saying. Yes.
Well, and going back to your mom's experience, what I don't think they made clear for her was, hey, when we ask you for bare minimum, she's thinking, oh, so this creates some sort of base, but there's going to be access to some additional money instead of just this minimum that I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But that's not the way they acted about it. Right. So
exactly.
Part of it is aligning expectations and aligning goals, because again, maybe this isn't the best or fairest example to use against all financial advisors, because there were a lot of things that went really bad with the whole sequence of events.
Sure.
But they clearly were not aligning her goals with what they were moving forward and doing in terms of short-term, medium-term, long-term goals. I mean, just clearly, right? The way they locked up money, etc., was not at all.
Basically, they locked up
her in the
all of the money.
Yeah.
So this is what it looked like, Rod, and I'm just doing this off of memory, but I still have it. So she had a large annuity, a large life insurance contract, and then like her Social Security. And then of course she also had the money that was in the REIT that she lost. Mm-hmm. So it was like, and that equaled to like, maybe she had her house paid off and like $600,000, right? Plus her Social Security. That was like, she did have a little pension, but that was basically what she had to live off of. And to your point, going back to that, that's what they did. They locked anything that was excess that they're like, oh, she doesn't need this right this second. It just got locked up into places that like weren't going to be benefiting her in any way. So it was totally misguided. And back to your point, it was missing out on some of those core principles, like having liquidity for opportunity. Mm-hmm. I remember my mom, she's like this super sweet conservative lady. But as she got older, she also like enjoyed the idea of taking a little bit more risk and stuff. And so the other challenge is that methodology like basically took her out of the running to be able to go and take advantage of opportunities that she could have taken advantage of had that, just cash been available to her. So good point.
Yep. So, but going back to your question, well, how do wealthy people actually think about money? Is I think in our experience, again, the type of people we work with, they think about it as their responsibility, as opposed to what we see often on the traditional side is either I'm participating in the 401k, and so it's kind of like it's my responsibility, but it's really the employer that's driving the truck, and or having, putting a bunch of money into a brokerage account and then hiring an advisor and basically just letting them decide, make all the decisions on what it's going to be. And so they're not in charge, right?
Yeah, maybe passing off some of that kind of quarterbacking or responsibility.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things where I guess like in some ways it makes sense because like if you don't have as much money, money's like a stressful kind of frustrating thing. And as you get more money, it can still be stressful and frustrating, but you start to see like the opportunities that are created within that as well. So
yeah, and not only that, we just see so many people who are highly trained, narrowly trained in their profession, and so they don't feel qualified to go out and start making decisions about investing because they just don't know that world at all.
yeah, that's a good
Right?
point. So it's like if you equate it to the medical world, it's like it wouldn't be any different than passing off your health, right? You shouldn't pass off your health to a doctor, even though they may have a lot of expertise. And, people learn this the hard way all the time.
Yep.
And you shouldn't pass off your financial health to a financial advisor. Like at some level, we always have to realize that that's our responsibility and we're the ones that are driving that. And typically that's the mindset that we see out of our clientele, people that are making more money, who have a desire to create and build. That's pretty common, right? But you can also look at it and see a stark difference between what we see on kind of that investor, entrepreneur, creator world versus the kind of mentality of I'm just kind of making money to put it away and get by, but I don't really want to think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's a big world. There are a lot of different things that if you're at a starting point, you would have to learn to get to a place where you feel comfortable being in charge. But here's the thing. You're the one that has to live with the consequences of what happens, not the advisor. The advisor is going to get paid either way, right? And so many times, I hear people say stuff like, well, our interests are aligned because the more they build my portfolio, then the more they get paid because they're getting paid X percentage, right?
Mm-hmm.
And while I agree with that, the point is they're going to get paid either way. You could lose 20% from your portfolio and they're still going to get paid. Yes, they got paid less and they would rather have been paid more, but they're still going to get paid, right? Even after you lost money, now you're going to still pay them. Thanks for losing. Anyway, so it's just realizing I may not like the idea that I have to kind of be in charge, but to kind of ease that a little bit, you don't have to learn everything all up front either, right? And we're also not saying you don't rely on professionals for the expertise that they can bring to the table. Getting back to your medical analogy, you still go to the doctor, but you have a conversation. You have a discussion about what's going on, what your desired outcome is, and then making a decision together, right?
Yeah. So and you're very much still in a place where we're not suggesting that you go it alone. We're suggesting that you use we use advisors, but we take ownership. Okay. So a couple of principles when we're thinking about how the wealthy think differently. Number one, income's not a tool. Sorry, let's try that again. Income is a tool. It's not the end goal. Okay. Yeah. Liquidity is incredibly powerful. I say it all the time, but the idea is that you have to keep capital accessible, and they value control over, locking it up, over tax deferral. And by doing that, you're now providing yourselves the opportunity to take advantage of opportunities. I know that sounds silly, right? Yeah. I now have the opportunity, but the reality is that that's one of the major differences is we make sure that we're more cognizant of lost opportunity cost. So for someone like me, the idea of putting money away for 20 years and getting a 6 or 7 or 8% return on it just feels like a massive lost opportunity cost to what I know I could do with that money if I had it in, 5 other contexts, whether it was investing in alternative assets, whether it's investing in myself and my business. All of those things, like, to me, are just better opportunities. And I think what happens is that wealthy people who are money successful, typically start to catch that. And Rod, they're not afraid to be unconventional. They're not afraid to go against the grain when they need to. That's why you oftentimes see, it's funny because, like, we talk about how wealthy people are so risk averse, but I actually believe my experience would suggest that they're just thoughtful in the way that they take on risk, but not risk averse, very much willing to take it on, but just do it in a thoughtful and intentional way. You know what I mean? Instead of just avoiding it altogether, which, by the way, is a lot of what that traditional world is saying. Like, hey, let's try to keep something in as stable as we possibly can. Let's just let it, slow and steady wins the race. And my experience is that's just not how, like, the, big investors think. That's just not the way that they tick.
Yeah, well, and part of that goes back to this concept we talk about often of the risk-adjusted return, where the assumption is that the only way to get a higher return is to take on more risk. And the reason the assumption is that way is because that's what you're taught from the traditional financial advisors, right? But that's not necessarily the case. So getting back to your point here, the wealthy, the people we work with, are willing to take on that risk. It's not that they're just saying, hey, I always have to take on higher risk if I want to get the higher return. They're actually finding opportunities in investing in real estate or these other alternative assets where they can typically create a higher return and actually not take on more risk. Or and maybe said a different way, it's a completely different risk profile. And here's the thing that just always gets me is, if all of your money is in the stock market, in stocks, bonds, mutual funds, 401ks, the market goes down, you're going to lose money, right? The well-diversified portfolio is going to follow the rest of the market. It just is. So if you want to have something that is not on that same track, you have to have money that is not in those traditional places where it runs on a completely different track. And it's not that it doesn't have risk. It's not that there aren't cycles, because there are. It's on a completely different cycle. So now back to your earlier point, as you have the liquidity and you're willing to use leverage and other things like that, it's not that you're not taking on risk. It's different. It's a different risk than you take when you're just putting everything in the market.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? There's, and really, we could go on all the various different types of risks. There's a whole bunch of them that exist out there, and they all have to be considered in different ways. But, like, at the core of it, I think what we're getting back to is this initial thought of abundance versus scarcity, right? It all kind of comes back to the way I think about money, the way I think about life. And I've said this too, like, I'll say this. I don't think advisors or traditional advisors are, like, bad or doing a bad job or out there trying to, like, not do a good job. I think it's good people out there trying to do a good job for people. I just think the issue is that most of the stuff they're teaching is outdated, and outdated in 2 ways. It's outdated, number 1, in the sense that we're doing using the exact same principles we were using 50 years ago, but they've been proving to not get the kind of results. And yet there's not a lot of adjusting into different, better opportunities, right? They just kind of keep doubling down and say that, if you just do this long enough, it'll all work out. Right. So I feel like that's a really outdated, archaic way to think about how money's likely to work. And then, the other thing I always tell people is like, even if you just look at history, like, history is just not that long. So if we're talking 100 years, right? Like, I know that sounds like a long time, but I can't remember the name. I was telling you this morning, Rod, but I looked up somebody who I thought was dead, and they were 100. Well, they're actually 99 years old. And I was like, holy smokes, they're still like, well, that's one person's lifetime. My point is that you have to be looking at wealth entirely differently in order to kind of take the leaps that we're talking about. But the good news is once I get those ideas into my mind, it's like, it becomes this, like, epiphany. And suddenly things become a lot more clear. I start, avoiding things like tax deferral, and I start focusing on things like having liquidity that gives me opportunity to go and invest and do things that are more powerful. I start using things like leverage. I'm more focused on tax benefits, which, by the way, critical. I say it every single episode, Rod, but if you're not thinking about tax optimization, you just have to be, right?
Yeah.
It's such a huge part of a high income earner's, overall money journey, that if I'm not thinking about it, I'm just like literally, throwing money out the door.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you have to think about it more in a system rather than in singular moves. I have to think about money as a system. And the way I like to think about it is more like a business, right? If I start to treat investing and my money more like a business, then my experience is that those are the people who typically like do pretty unique, cool, exceptional things.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to repeat some of the things you said, but by thinking of it as a business, you're looking for opportunities. What does the market have to offer? And when I say the market, I mean as a whole, everything that's out there that I can take advantage of and use to build the wealth. And when you start to think of it that way, you start to get a little more creative. And so you're seeing things from different eyes than you were when you were just putting the money in the 401k and just investing in the stock market and letting someone else make those decisions. Right.
Yeah. So I just realized I only gave one of my outdated. Okay. I said there's two outdated issues. Number one is the actual financial principles. But number two, and I think this is even bigger, this is the shift that I feel like we're seeing, is people don't want that life anymore. Mm-hmm. Younger people aren't saying, I want to get a job at 23, work for 35 years, and live off of my 401k. Like, that's not the life that people want. And yet all of the planning, everything that I see out there is still dedicated toward that end, toward how can we create enough money for you to live at some point in the future. Right.
Yeah.
And what we're saying is, okay, we have to be responsible and thoughtful and think about the future. But the irony is that if I think about today and I make the moves that I need to make today, I can create better life and a better situation today, and I can do it better in the future.
Yeah.
But it just takes a mindset shift difference.
Yep. I like it.
Okay, Rod. So here's the question. How would you recommend somebody design a system that supports the life that they actually want to live? Where do they start?
Yeah, great question. I mean, it goes back to, this becomes the kind of impetus of what we ended up creating as the invest with benefits kind of philosophy or framework, because it is a system, and it's not a one size fits all. Everybody go down this track and do these things, follow these exact steps, and you'll all get to the same kind of promised land. It's saying, hey, we all live in different places, have different opportunities, different interests. Our starting point is different. Maybe some of us are W-2, some of us are business owners, etc. But the framework. So when we talk about conservative leverage and velocity and cash flow, tax optimization, asset protection, and estate maximization, those are the core principles. Those are the principles that we can use to create that framework, that system, so that we're taking into account the things that will help us build wealth and protect the wealth, right? So we're doing both. We're not ignoring so earlier you were saying, well, traditional, they're just all about kind of that protection side and needs-based and things like that. We're not saying we ignore those things. We're saying there's so much more that we can do and accomplish and grow and build if we're not only thinking about those things.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So what I'm hearing you saying, Rod, is if you don't already have a system locked in, feel free to borrow ours, right? Yeah. Those core principles, like those are things that we've been teaching for a long time, and they come from real life experience. It's designed to help people use true principles that we've been seeing play out for years and years with thousands of high income earners, thousands of prolific investors. And while it doesn't give us the exact roadmap, it gives us the principles to create our own roadmap. And that's, I think, the core of what we need to be thinking about. How do we create this roadmap? We use those 6 core principles. And then, if you're still struggling, just call Rod up. He'll help you from there. Does that sound good?
There you go. I like it.
Okay, Rod, do you have any kind of final thoughts? Like, I want to just make sure, like, this doesn't come across as just hate on traditional advisors. It's actually more of a hate on traditional planning in general. It just happens to be that advisors are the mouthpiece of the traditional planning industry.
Yeah.
And it's certainly not meant to be, I did say we were going to beat them up, but it's really not meant to be personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the bigger thing.
Yeah.
It's really based on this idea that there's some really outdated principles that just they're wrapped up in and we can't get out of. And our hope, and the reason that we do this podcast and the reason we do all the stuff we do, is so that we can break that trend of people missing out on opportunities to live a more impactful, more fulfilling life by being more financially successful.
And I think our kind of message is that if you open your mind, again, if you're not there, if you're hearing this and you're like, yeah, but I still just don't see the difference. If you can start to learn and maybe embrace some of those principles and move towards them, then you'll see it'll become very clear how different of a world that it is once you break away from that kind of traditional side.
Well said, Rod. And if you need proof, join the community, integrate into our community, join the Facebook group. You'll literally be there with, well, I guess there's probably like 800 people in there, but like, these are people who are extremely successful investors. Like, everybody that we work with are high income earners. Everybody thinks about money in this way. So if you're struggling to find that for yourself, that's the best way to do it. Integrate into a community like ours. And there's a whole bunch of other really great communities that you can integrate with too, that just help us pick up that really critical mindset, helps us to start seeing what's possible. And for me, I think that was like maybe bigger than anything else. I was able to see other people doing really unique, special things. And that suddenly opened up my mind to think, hey, maybe there's a better way to go about this. And it turned out there absolutely was a better way. And man, I could go on forever. Rod, do you have any closing thoughts before we part for the day?
Well, just kind of building off of that we often meet up with people and they're like, well, man, why aren't more people talking about this? And the answer is they are, you just don't know where to find them, because the people that we just are around on a daily basis, you say investing, they think stock market, right? They think 401k, they think traditional financial planning. And so if you're one who is starting to break away from that, but you're also thinking, I'm just the weird one, I'm on an island here, just know that there are many other people who are on that track, and together we can make it happen.
Love it. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.